There's a lot of noise happens in both boom cycle as well as the kind of bust cycle. It's very important to understand like what is the reality and what is the noise and what is the hype cycle, and then really focus on what is the next thing that you can like learn, either technology wise or domain wise, and where you are willing to open up and try something new. And if we keep that kind of mode of thinking, it is super beneficial.
Hey, my name is Felix Tia. I'm the host of The Culture of Code. We invite experienced and successful tech industry leaders like software engineers, engineering managers, and product managers to reveal exactly what they've learned about growing and succeeding in the tech industry. In today's episode, we have Renga Kannan, Senior Software Engineering Manager at Google. Welcome, Renga.
Hey, thanks, Phoenix. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on here. So you've been in industry already for over 2 decades, a bunch of years at Oracle, moved to startups and then worked at Meta and now at Google. Tell us about some of the maybe key differences that you found over those like 2 decades of working in the tech industry and any differences that you found in the different kind of companies that you worked at during that time.
It's a great question. Like, yeah, it's a little over 25 years in the industry. So the industry also like it changed dramatically in the last 25 years. And I was feeling fortunate enough to be part of those kind of really growth. And there's a lot of up and down. So for people like realize when I joined my career, it is part of the dot-com boom. And also like I've seen dot-com bust. And then there is a financial kind of like, boom and financial bust, a lot of cycles. And technology itself is really also changed from just when I started like working, a lot of companies were doing the e-business software where they're kind of working for enterprise companies, changing their kind of a people-based system to more of the software automation. And then that changed dramatically with the kind of like Google, Meta, and LinkedIn is coming, where tech-first businesses. There's a lot of transformations really happened in the last 20 years, and that really made it very interesting for me to kind of feel like be part of that. And a lot of other changes also happened in how the software is being built and how the software is being used and delivered. For example, like in the old days, I still remember like writing a software, cutting in a CD or a DVD kind of devices and shipping it, perpetual model to cloud-based, and then B2B and B2C. So if you look back in my career, I think that's exactly what I kind of transitioned for. I started my kind of like career in a B2B enterprise softwares, and then slowly changed from their enterprise perpetual to cloud-based kind of a software for enterprises, and then moved on to B2C, and then really moved on to completely social media, like Meta and Google kind of really, like, spectrum of changes. There's a lot of really change transition in how we build a software and how we consume and what is this being kind of really used for. That is a one dimension. Very interesting, and it's very important for people to kind of really notice the change happening and be willing to be open to make those changes as in the career. Otherwise, you merely get stuck in one direction or the other. Similarly, another kind of really dimension of really change, if you look at my career, started when I joined my kind of first company. It happened to be a startup, very small startup in 1996. And then I moved on to larger corporations like an Oracle for 11 years. And then again went on to very small startups and medium-sized companies, and again come back to Meta and Google. So transitioning, getting experiences in working in large corporations, understanding their processes, structures, and then really getting that, as well as going and diving into some of the startups and then really be chaotic, be unstructured, and able to kind of roll your sleeves and to work on it is also like something is very unique. And I would really say that that's what makes people different. If they really have the blend of experiences in different domains, different tech, different technologies, kind of like in a path, as well as the company size. Part of it is what has made it very interesting.
So lots of interesting things you said there. I want to first touch on the unique perspective that you have, which is that you started like 25 years ago during the big boom and bust of the dot-com
Yes.
era, the financial crisis, and now the state that we're at now. I think a lot of listeners may have maybe only been around during the great financial crisis or probably sometime after that. And what they're experiencing now with a lot of the tech layoffs feels like a apocalyptic event maybe for a lot of people's careers. Given your perspective, how would you, I guess, either confirm their fears or alleviate their fears? How do you see it given your experience with these other kind of past cycles?
Yeah, at the very beginning, I want to say that the fear is pretty natural and the people should recognize that fear part of it. we don't want to say on the blush saying that there's nothing to worry about it, part of it. So this time, when you really go through the bust cycles, the fear is pretty quite natural. And the new cycle is also going to kind of like revalidate the fear more and more. So first of all, recognize the reality is the kind of number one thing. But if I look back, all these kind of the boom and bust cycles are always being very helpful for the industry. And more importantly, super helpful for the individuals in the career, in my opinion, because it is all defining moment. That's what is making the tech is very unique, because we're having a very short cycles of really boom and bust. And that makes this kind of really, the industry is very lively and people can really like, revalidate and where they stand and what next to catch and etc. It's pretty kind of, I would really say that in the channelize the fear to be like a mostly understand and then really cut down the noise. There's a lot of noise happens in both boom cycle as well as the kind of bust cycle. It's very important to understand like what is the reality and what is the noise and what is the hype cycle, and then really focus on what is the next thing that you can like learn, either technology wise or domain wise, and where you are willing to open up and try something new. And if we keep that kind of mode of thinking, it is super beneficial. I would really say both boom and bust is kind of the opportunity. I really see it's more of an opportunity, because when you really see a bust, there is a boom coming again. And you got to kind of really start seeing the transition. What is this bus cycle is going to bring innovation to the table, and where is the industry is really moving? And some of the companies otherwise not really like willing to attempt some of the changes, they will really attempt to make these changes right now because they have nothing to lose in the bus cycle. So they will be willing to take more risk. So I think we being open to that will be like pretty interesting. So if you look at my career, right, I made a lot of technology shifts in these kind of bus cycles. When this continuously being booming, you don't really have motivation to kind of try something new or changing your fields or changing your domain. But this is an opportunity for us to kind of like think about it. And then if you look back the history, every of these cycles is always come back with a great growth. And who were kind of like stayed put and really channelize the energy during this time, they are the winners when the growth happens. And instead of really waiting for
Yeah.
the growth happens the next year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You think you see a lot of the household name startups that exist today came out of the great financial crisis. A lot
Yeah.
of them came out, right, 2012,
Yeah.
13, 14, and so on. I guess I'll ask you to look maybe in your crystal ball now and say, what do you think is the opportunity? What do you see as like overall, I guess, sentiments, or what do you see as specific industries that you think are going to be part of the next boom that comes out of this bus cycle?
Yeah. So I think if you look by software engineering per se, I really think that the traditional software engineering that what we used to do in the past is kind of like coming to be maturing cycle right now. In the sense, if you happen to be a software engineer, so you really like doing a coding, you can really take a feature, you can write a code part of it. And that seems to be more of a commoditized at this point. We learned a lot in the industry and we passed on that learning to the next generations. The colleges are also preparing kids a lot better for this particular kind of field. Right now, that is becoming more of a commodity. So the next cycle is going to be like, how do we do next value additions on top of the traditional software that we really have? One of the hype right now we really see is the AI and the kind of like generative AI and generally AI part of it. And I have a feeling that today the AI is being utilized only by very select few large companies who has the business case and who can really have resources and who has the kind of knowledge to do it. They're getting advantage in the last kind of a decade. And now that may be transitioning into coming to mass. A lot of people, a lot of companies, even a small, medium based companies may really have an access to kind of the ML and AI technology as part of it. So transitioning and being open to kind of really see that how this AI is going to be applied in the business sense and your software, kind of what problem we'll be solving and what technologies that we need to be part of the ecosystem of an AI is something that people should really watch out for, because the software engineering methodologies are very different in a traditional kind of a software that you're building for a business kind of applications to using AI to solve a business problem. To give an example, right? Before like in 2004, you won't be seeing a kind of like companies that is really having a tech as the core of the business and running the business. And tech happened to be like more of an auxiliary. They'll do manufacturing, they'll do services, and tech is kind of like aiding them to do that business better. But after that, 2004, you see a lot of companies like Airbnb, Uber, their core business is a tech, right? So that you see that kind of a lot of companies emerged as core business happened to be tech and then really building business out of it. And that's what we really lived so far. And I really see in the next 10 years, there may be companies that is doing the AI-based business as the kind of the core and then you're driving the business forward. So in that scenario, the AI is going to be like far more reachable and far more required. So changing into the dimension, think about what kind of a business problems that the AI can really solve and what kind of a skills and tools that needs to be learned towards that will be like something I think it's a good opportunity to kind of open it.
Yeah, so are you saying that maybe for software engineers now that are in the typical, let's say, generalist roles that you believe are becoming commoditized, that should they be working or looking to work at, let's say, AI startup, or are you saying they should be looking to see how can they use AI in their current roles? Like, what do you think is like the best, I guess, opportunity that someone might want to focus on?
Yeah, there are two possibilities, right? I think for people who are pretty early on in their career, they are not really like into the industries yet. There are a lot of materials available to build simple AI models and then really getting to understand what is the AI, purpose of it, and getting hands-on dirty and building that basic necessary skills and then really being at least able to talk about that field is something is really required first step. At this point in time, I would really say there's a lot of startups that is going to be playing a lot of big roles in AI and domain part of it. Anybody's really coming out. Given that hiring freeze going on in the larger companies and then hiring is somewhat slow, I think there is quite a bit of opportunity to kind of really start in the startup areas. I think this again go back to my kind of a dot-com bust style cycle. Whoever got benefited is during the bus cycle, there a lot of new startups came in. They were kind of really like, willing to take the risk and then really went in there. And those startups kind of really pushed the envelope. And that's when they redefined, learned a lot of technologies. And then later they came back to the larger companies. I would really say consuming kind of a learned, getting trained with a lot of materials that we really have online on the AI and then AI principles and getting hands dirty. And then really looking for opportunities in any startups. I think anything that you do in AI today will not really go waste. The startup idea may not be really panning out, but the learning, the expertise, the skills that you're gaining out of it is going to be gold. And then it's going to drive the careers forward.
And off the top of your mind, ways that software engineers can kind of build up the skill sets that would be required in a world where every company has some AI in their software?
Yeah, I think there are some basic building blocks that I think it is common across all the business problems in the AI part of it, right? So the basic statistics and then really understanding and data, that's a huge difference I really see between a traditional software engineering and the AI domain. Data analysis and able to interpret data. It is one of the key principal fundamentals in the AI world. In a previous software engineering world, that is not required. You don't need to be like doing that data kind of a slicing and analysis part of it. And really able to kind of get, understand, be comfortable with looking at the data, making hypotheses, interpretations, and kind of validating that part of it. It is something is a foundation that is common across any use case of an AI. And also like using some kind of basic model, let's say that PyTorch or anything of the sort, where open source kind of technologies in terms of AI and building models. And very interestingly today is like there are a lot of pre-built models available with the data sets that is not even possible 5 to 6 years ago. So I think at this time, there is no excuse for us not to kind of really try our hands dirty for even a simple use case like, predict the price of a house. So doing some kind of stock predictions and all these things are all pretty much available out in practice. And that's what I would like to kind of really start with. So basically basic statistics and data analysis and data insights and hypothesis building and some kind of basic model kind of expertise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you mentioned, the data sets are out there. There are marketplaces that you can buy data sets or models
Yeah.
even to play around with.
Yeah, that's what I'm fascinated with, right? I think every other 5 years, if we look at it, next generation is really having a lot more advantage for before this current generation because there is so much of things that are going to be available for them that previously we used to struggle with. I think 5, 6 years back, if you really ask me to pull a data of any size, that itself is a bigger project. We used to be spending a lot of resources and time to kind of get that to have a starting point. Today, that is available for us,
Yeah.
right? I think that we can really make use of this as a kind of jump start. And then we can really focus a lot on kind of building on top of it.
Yeah. I think, one thing that we do have to kind of, I guess, be aware of is that there are these cycles that you have to be ready for and that are coming that seem inevitable. And you should be prepared for as a software engineer that these are skill sets that are going to be in demand within the next few years. I think right before the AI cycle, though, was the whole crypto and blockchain phase that seems to just kind of now be pushed to the back burner in at least in the mainstream kind of media about what is the future of technology. Is it fair to say that if someone jumped on the kind of blockchain and crypto focus that they picked the wrong horse, or like what are your thoughts there? Because that was also, it would seem, at least some people might have seen inevitable as like the future of technology.
It's just a great question. I think I wanted to kind of emphasize one point. While people should recognize the fear that they really have right now, that the transition is really happening to be in a very big wave right now. But they should also understand that there is a lot of really hype and there is a lot of noise. And it'll be like very hard. Anybody says this is what is going to be the world in the next 3, 4 years, that it is not going to be possible. They may be pretty much lying. So you should really keep that in a grain of salt. Like, what you may be really thinking it is a cycle that is going to pay off. It may not really pay off that big in reality part of it. I think the question that they're really asking, like, as you said, like a few years back, people really went for blockchain. And before that, this happened to be big data. And before that, this happened to be like CDCI. Before that, this really happened to be like, cloud. I can really name anything. So every kind of really shift, it is really offered its benefit, but it's also really have its own limitations, part of it, right? So people should really be able to recognize that. But I think for people in the early part of their career, I think they should not be worried about it, right? Because anything that you do, whether it is a big data or blockchain, there is a transferable skills that you are learning. So partly is technology, partly business problem that you're trying to solve, and partly the approach in which you're taking to kind of really solve. But you'll be like gaining a lot of expertise and experiences, even on the cases where things are not working out. And it is going to be much easier for somebody to transition from a blockchain kind of like experience to kind of like AI and kind of ML just by looking at the transferable skills of what they learned than somebody starting new. So I won't be like too super kind of like worried about where we start, and especially for people like in the early part of their career. If people happen to be in tail end of the career, what they're betting on is more important. They need to be selected because they have a very lesser runway. But people coming in very early on, I think it doesn't matter. Find what is kind of relevant to today's market and what is relevant in today's time, and really gain experiences and be open-minded and pick both the very specific experiences for AI ML and also like transferable skills. So you also like learn communications and how to really like look at hypothesis, business problems, and so many things that you'll be learning. That is 50% or more that you can really transfer to the next kind of leadership.
Yeah, so even if you invest the effort into learning a technology that ultimately becomes a lot more hype than reality, you still carry like skill sets into the next thing. How do you typically determine and recognize what is the next thing that you should be focused on? I think in it's cases where it's super clear, like AI is everywhere, crypto and blockchain was everywhere, big data was everywhere. Those things make sense. But what about the kind of smaller markets or smaller skill sets that are not as popular in media, but that you're still able to recognize as something you should invest your time into learning about?
I think if you look for entry level people or like early in the career, so they have to kind of like get some of these fundamental skills pretty deep on chart. The way that the industry kind of like look back 20 years, right? The first 10 years of our career, you'll be learning a lot of deeper expertise in, even if it is going to be one technology and one domain, you really go as deep as possible and then really build a complete expertise on this. Not necessarily that's where you'll be spending your entire career, but it goes back to what I really said is you can really transfer those learnings into the new kind of era as part of it. I think that even if AI is look at it, it is a very broad term. Yeah, it's not a crystal ball to really say what is the AI can look like and evolve into, right? So you should be broadly looking into, hey, what is that is my heart goes for? Do I need to be like front-end engineers? Or do I need to kind of like back-end engineers? Am I interested in infrastructure? Am I interested in solving any business problems? Am I really happen to be a data kind of like savvy person? So I would really say that having that broader understanding of really like, what is your interest and what is your kind of like connection to the heart, and then look for kind of really what you need to be doing in that particular kind of a specific domain. And that is really better kind of like, focus than looking for what is that is going to be latest trend. Because I really believe that there is always an opportunity, there is always market for everything, right? Whether you can capitalize the new catch of waves or not is what we are talking about. That is really like mostly a timing of where you happen to be in the intersection of really where the industry going and where you happen to be in a career. But most importantly, for every individuals, I would really say is understand who you are a little bit and really see what you like the most, because it's very important. Everything is really having a steep learning curve. While it is very interesting to learn, sometimes you may not really like that kind of really steep learning curve part of it. But if you align yourself with your interest and what comes to you naturally, and really go towards that particular segment and get the basic foundations and fundamentals, that is not going to change. See, for example, if you look at software engineers, like basic coding skills, algorithms, problem solvings are all going to be the same. Whether you do like blockchain, whether you do web app programming, whether you do kind of AI, that is not going to really change. And I think that's what people really should focus on, in my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that if you're early in your career, it's more important to get the reps in on just like practice of learning and learning the fundamentals so that you
Yep.
can kind of almost like slingshot your way into the next thing if you do want to try to catch a wave of something that seems to be the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I think if people should not feel like, if you happen to be not doing AI ML, you're missing a big thing. They should not feel that way. Rather, they should say like whatever they are really like doing right now, it's aligned with their interest and aligned with their kind of like natural kind of strength. And they should really go deep and really sincerely go deep into that particular part of it without worrying about like, what is it really going to go in the future. But whatever you do out of this is definitely going to pay off. And you can easily transition. Transitioning into this kind of like in a different tech, different domain is not really that hard as people think.
Mm. Yeah, you said to us like one of the career setbacks that you feel like you had was just becoming too obsessed with one technology. Can you say more about this? Like, what was the one technology, and like, how did you know that okay, this is like too much?
Yeah, so I think I made my mistake in my kind of like my own career, right? I think when you started very early on, I was into kind of like the B2B domain. I was into kind of like building enterprise software. I've applied all the principles which I talked about, right? I was being very sincere and I liked it. I really gone so deep into it. But there was a time that where I felt myself like, and I will not do anything other than this domain, this specific kind of really things. And that's when I really later realized the industry is shifting. The growth is happened to be in elsewhere. This is having its own plateau. And I have to kind of a little bit work on my way out of really coming out of this emotionally, like I'm not attached to one specific domain, one specific technology, and then they give a try and then they come out of it. It was a bit hard initially. It is hard for two reasons, right? Once you may go deeper into one specific technology and domain, you are being recognized as a successful person and you understand like what does it really take to get there. It is a lot of hard work and a lot of expertise building. It is quite natural. You feel like if I wanted to try something else in a new field, I have to invest the same amount of energy and time to get where I am today. And this is a very typical kind of a dilemma that happens in a very early on career when you're making the first switch. But in contrary, I felt like if you're open-minded, if you make a switch from one particular domain tech or anything from to other, if you're doing it right, it doesn't really take the same effort as you're doing for the first one. The very first technology, very first kind of domain, effort is going to be very higher because you need to learn a lot. But when you go to second one, it is not the same amount of an effort and energy. In fact, you can also be complimenting for the people that you're bringing some connection of bring additional expertise and thoughts that is not available in this domain from your current experiences. It's also going to help you to kind of accelerate. So I would really say, now I really come to a conclusion. 4 to 5 years is the right kind of period of time that you should start really reevaluating and really saying that where your current kind of focus, is it plateauing or it is paying off or is there any room for you to kind of get more? And you can really do kind of gut check on that. I think anywhere it is taking like 2 to 3 years to get as a master and then 4 to 5 years where you're kind of thriving. And a 4 or 5 years time period is a really good kind of really a reality check and really say, I'm done enough. I'm comfortable. Should I really now come out of the comfort zone and try something new? And if you feel like you can continue to do it, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, 4 to 5 years is not that long in a long career, right? That's you can have like 10 cycles of that in a career. But for someone that's starting out, that's brand new, like 1 year in the career, it sounds so long to invest 4 to 5 years in something that you're not sure is going to pay off. I think it's the requirement to kind of think about this as a long-term career is important for you to kind of make wise decisions for today. And, one thing you spoke about to us was that there's a challenge of balancing current execution with future innovation, like be able to focus on like what you're working on now versus like what could be the next thing in the future. How do you balance that in your kind of day to day? Let's say that you do believe that some field within AI is the future and you should be building skill sets there. But stuff you're working on now is just doesn't is not applicable, or it's just like there's no, let's say, a company buy-in to bring AI into your field of work today. How do you balance like doing your work today versus learning for the future?
So it's a great question. I think tech industry is one of such industry where constant learning is something that you cannot really take it out of your plate. Even though you're coming out of a college, you feel like I'm done with all my kind of education, so I'm going to work on it. I would really say even today, I dedicate myself 30 to 40% of really like, picking up and learning something is new. When I really say learning, the learning can be very different. Observing kind of like a domain or like an understanding the domain, or it could be like a practically like an applying work, building a skills and applying the skills of any of this kind of really sort. It is quite natural that you may really happen to be in a company or you're working in a job that is not really offering what you think you wanted to learn. There is no shortcut for this other than really taking your time. I would really say time box it, what you do for work, and then really like take some personal time off and then really do learning of what you would like to do it. And then really constantly build that particular kind of like an expertise and skill. And more importantly, I would have done in the past, like, use like-minded people or network or meetup kind of like, forum where you're getting exposed to what you are not exposed in the current kind of job offering. So then you can at least get to know the people and to see, understand what is really happening. That may really open up a lot more connections and also like can give you a lot more perspective on what is that is going to be. So the point is dedicate some time for a personal learning that is not really being available in the current day-to-day job. So your time box your kind of really job and then we do some capacity for this as well. And then expose yourself to the field with the like-minded people and really build a network around it. And that will eventually lead you to the way.
And, I added this in my question as a constraint, but I think maybe the first step really is to try to find out if your company will kind of let you learn on the job, learn in these kind of roles. That would be ideal, right? Where the current execution is actually helping you build the skill sets that you believe are going to be
Yeah.
valuable in the future.
Yeah. And I do agree that has happened to be that case. It is much easier accelerated path, but it's not, may not be the case in all the time for everybody, but that should not be the blocker.
One thing you're saying to me was that you have a very interesting perspective on people that got laid off in like this cycle versus previous cycles that you've seen in the last two decades. Tell us more about your perspective here.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of like share something, what I've observed in my personal kind of like connections and my experiences part of it, right? Which is pretty counterintuitive to what people really see. I've seen people really got laid off in the past. They have always kind of like thrived after the layoffs. They have reached new heights. Otherwise, I believe it is not possible. I think the way is there are a couple of reasons I really feel. Some of the people really got laid off in my past kind of experiences. They were kind of in a place for a lot longer and they are not willing to take a risk of making a move and they are not really motivated to kind of really make a change and kind of really stuff. I think layoffs really made a forced way for them to try something new. And after the layoffs, they kind of really went in a different direction. They did something differently and they've done phenomenally very well. And they made them more resilient. And then on their career is really like got into different trajectory because they kind of know they've seen hey, what is layoff really means. And they know that like a job can really go off and I can really try something on my own and they thrive more on this part of it. Right. So I think
Yeah.
people should really think it is sometimes it is very hard in the very short term. And I do really have an empathy, but I really feel like long term, I have seen people have done phenomenally very well. And some for somebody, it is somewhat a blessing to kind of really say that, okay, this kind of a layoff. If you look back in my history, after pre-layoff and post-layoff, my career is very different.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful message. I think you mentioned earlier on about how it's easy to get comfortable and kind of just stay with what's working, what you know, but then sometimes, I mean, it doesn't have to be this, but sometimes a layoff can be like a forcing function to really get you to reevaluate how you want to spend the next part of your
Yeah,
career. And the second thing you mentioned about, and I've been part of layoffs too, and I think it is helpful to know that you can survive a layoff
that's right.
and not have that kind of fear hanging over you at all
Yeah,
times. Where like, I've gone through it before, so yes, maybe we're in a down cycle, maybe we're in a recession, but I know I can bounce back from this. Like knowing that let you operate from a place of I guess it doesn't let you operate from a place of like fear or like about avoiding, about not losing rather than
Yep.
focusing on how can I continue to win.
Yep.
Right. So you have experience, and I think this is, I think, and maybe not every single startup, but I think the opportunities there to try different things out is sometimes more available at startups. And you worked at large enterprises and at startups. What are your thoughts on someone that's early on in their career or leaving college for the first time? Are there pro versus cons for going for a large enterprise versus working at a startup right out of school?
Yeah, I think there is not a kind of a clear cut answer because a blanket answer. The reason is it depends on the individual. I would really say certain kind of individuals, depending on their kind of really discipline personal, startup may be really fitting very well. For somebody else, the bigger companies really may really fit in very well. Both startups and big companies are offering a lot of really good things to learn, and it's having its own drawbacks. So I would really say what is more important, to my opinion, is having the blend of experience in your career in the first 10 years is very important. That where you really start part of it, whether you're starting in a big company or like in a startup company. But if at all you want to give a perspective, I would really say that your kind of learning will be like accelerated pretty quick in terms in if you go in a startup because it is less structured, there's more opportunities, there is a less process. So, and then people are willing to kind of take a bet on you because they need more kind of like helping hand than looking for like, a lot of other people competing. So startup is going to offer you a lot of expertise that you can really build very quickly, very easily in a short amount of time. But what you may really struggle is when you kind of transition yourself into larger companies and where you kind of sustainable products that you're building for a serious business problems, some of the processes, some of that process, how people are being kind of looking at the opportunities and how they're willing to kind of like ship and all these things, those kind of really structures is very important in the industry as well. Even when the startup is really becoming a bit more mature, we need to bring those kind of structures. So one should be exposed to both. I would really say for individuals, startup can really give you a lot more opportunities to learn the raw skills very early on, very quickly. So that could be one option to go, assuming that you can really willing to put up with it kind of really pressure and time and ambiguity and not having any coaching and other aspect of it. That is a kind of a drawback in startup. Whereas if you go to kind of really big companies, you get a lot of coaching, a lot of really like, structured setups. But you may a little bit learning wise, it may take a bit longer for you to learn the raw things because your ability to getting exposed is limited.
Yeah, I've spoken to someone that really enjoys going back and forth between the two, big tech and the startups, and like taking what they learn from the kind of formal structures of big tech into applying it and adding value right away to startups, but then learning a lot of more, having more kind of horizontal like bandwidth at a startup and then getting exposure that way and going back
Yep.
to big tech and so on. You mentioned that this is something that is valuable to have this kind of blend of experience. Do you find that that is attractive though to hiring managers? And I ask because you do often see big tech hiring from big tech and like constantly, someone goes from, I mean, I guess your example from Meta to Google and like so on, you see this kind of transition between all of the big tech companies. So do you see that? I mean, I see the benefit of that as like an employee that has that experience. But when it comes to hiring, do hiring managers look for that?
I think definitely I really see the kind of a plus. For now, I'm a hiring manager. I'm looking for a very diverse experience. And if people are exposed to different kind of domains and different size of the organizations, early stage startups, mid stage startups, and then really large corporations, I would really see that as a real plus. And many of my kind of people that I know that I hire, they see this as a kind of a plus part of it. But what is more important is not what you really see on the resume paper and how you really taken the value out of these experiences and really speak through in the kind of interview. It plays a big difference. You may really have two different people gone through same kind of experiences in their done something in startups, something in big corporations. But have they really got the true value of experiences? And did they really build expertise and like in a perspective from the learning and they can apply for this or not is very, very important. From a very early and mid stage career for a big corporation hiring. So we don't even in the initial stages of really hiring, it is all like in a pretty streamlined. There is no bias between whether you're having a big corporate experience or a startup experience because interview process is so structured. But I think where it makes a difference is if hiring manager looking at a profile for a job opening, if you really bring the blend of experiences, that make a huge plus.
Awesome. I'll leave this last question. As someone that has over 20 years of experience in industry, if you go back in time and kind of give yourself, one piece of advice early on in your career that would have helped you a lot and maybe save yourself some headaches and heartaches, what would it be?
I would really say like people underestimate the time they really have in the early part of their careers. The time commitment is increasing in both professional and personal lives as you really kind of grow. And the more and more your time constraints are becoming harder and harder, your ability to try new things are going to be limiting. So one thing I would really say is wisely use the time that you really have in your hand early on in their career and really try to kind of be willing to try multiple things and then really be open. That is number one, I would really say. Number two, I would really say is don't be afraid of I think be cognizant of the hype and the buzz cycles. And while you should be recognizing them, but don't get really sucked into this kind of a noise cycle part of it. And then distance yourself away and then really see it in a very objective way in what is really happening. And then don't get emotionally attached to anything, any technology or any particular things for a lot longer and allow yourself to kind of like go with the flow and then willing to kind of like make a change. I would really say if someone can really make a change the first 5 to 7 years of a career and they can really rotate their experience, they'll be like a lot more valuable.
Awesome. I love all that advice. Thank you so much for your time. Renga, Senior Software Engineering Manager at Google, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey, advice, and experience with us.
Thanks, Felix. Thank you so much.